actually engaged in a conversation about taking this on, though I did talk to people at the BBC who sort of gave me some helpful and some less helpful steers, but I had some very constructive conversations there. I think that, it's fair to say there was caution, of course there was, but actually we had the most frustrating element of the funding experience was to go round to various different funds which are available for making films. People would walk round and round the table going, oh gosh, isn't this intriguing, this is marvellous, and then at the key moment would say, actually, do you know what, I think we better not. It might cause health and safety problems in Luton or whatever, some, half-assed excuse. Similarly, people might say, oh, well, we can put money in if you change the ending. That's not really what you want to hear. So no. I think, we just took time and made sure that we found people who would see what it was and go with it.
And, of course, the film would be nothing if you didn't have such a solid cast. I didn't recognize any of the actors. Did any of them come from your regular stable of collaborators?
The core cast came from all sorts of different directions. I'd been in touch with Riz from early on in my research because, for one reason or another, I bumped into him. He'd done Road to Guantanamo. He's a rapper as well. So it was inevitable, I suppose, that our paths would cross. Arsha Ali came through the audition process. Nigel Lindsay is somebody I actually worked with before. He was in Bar Side briefly, and I'd always admired his work and I just saw him in a Pinter play and thought, of course, that's who should play Barry. Kayvan was somebody who was well spoken about, so I sort of got him in, and these guys really shone in a huge field. We must have seen between 200 and 300 different people. A lot of them were very good, but these guys were head and shoulders above them. Adil Akhtar, who plays Faisal, was just a bolt from the blue. We were having trouble with that character, and he came in, and I said, I tried on various bits of script, and I said, okay, now just imagine that you bought some bleach, but the thing is, you bought it all from the same shop, and you put on different voices, but actually each voice is the same, and explain to me what you did under pressure. And that scene sort of survived unchanged right through to the film. He has an absolutely inscrutably brilliant sort of timing about him, Adil. So everybody, people came from different directions, but, I suppose dominantly the casting process. And then people further afield, the great sort of walk-on parts like Kevin Eldon or Julia Davis, they're people I've worked with before, but they were neither Pakistani nor 25.
There are some really interesting tonal shifts throughout the film, and one that I think I've had the most discussions with other colleagues who have seen the film is this very understanding wife and child of one of our wannabe suicide bombers who, in a very deadpan way, show their support to Daddy for wanting to blow himself up. How did that relationship evolve in the writing process?
That obviously comes from reality, comes from the research at some level. So you work out how to include that in your script, and I wanted to reflect that reality. So that came from the research, and I wanted to include that at some level in the story. I think the kid doesn't understand what's going on, but there's a sort of coded version of what's going on in their discussions with him. The wife understands completely what's going on. It reflects many things. I think there's a myth that the sort of person might get involved in a terrorist cell is going to have medieval, old-fashioned fundamentalist attitudes about women, for example. There's not much evidence to support that. I mean, across the board you find actually that, women as well as men can have got to the position where that seems like the right thing to do. And I felt that gives us more insight than if you don't include it. And deliberately, the tonal shifts are deliberate, because I think they expand the reach of the film. They give you more. You're saying more, that you're not just doing a sort of a merry jig on the riff of jihadism being in some way innately daft.
When I was researching before talking to you, I caught up with that piece in The Observer a couple years ago when you went off on Martin Amis for his thoughts on Muslims. How often does something like that come up where you have to decide, should I speak out about this or bite my tongue?
Not very often, because, to be honest, it's not the most effective way to make a contribution, I think. So you know that sort of biting your tongue and channeling it through a piece of work is probably the better way to do it. There, I just simply lost my temper with the idea of making bold pronouncements on such thin research that it seemed just ridiculous and stupid. I think what happened there was that, at some level, 9/11 blew Martin Amis's mojo, and then he was going to subject us to watch him trying to thrash some life back into his limp member. And I felt that it was pretty unbecoming and not very accurate.
No, fair enough, absolutely. Do you then find that film and TV is the best medium to vent your frustrations?
I don't. No, I mean, this isn't the film really about venting frustration so much as I think just pursuing question and what you find surprising answers. I mean, the idea of this whole thing being related to humor was a surprise to me. I didn't expect to be reading about a Yemeni plot on Millennium Eve where these jihadis wanted to blow up a US warship, which was moored offshore. So they came down at 3 o'clock in the morning, they assembled by the quayside, they put their launch in the water, they filled it with explosives, and it sank. And at that point, I thought, right, what's the look on their faces? This is a kind of Keystone Cops moment. This is not what I was expecting to find out. And when you then discover that that repeats itself in different ways down the different avenues of research, well, then you sort of find that you're onto something interesting. So that's basically the sort of the beat that determines where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Some of your other projects, you've satirized people in power, and this film, of course, inverts that since you have these radicals as the anti-heroes that we're following. Where do you go next? I mean, what else fascinates, confuses, troubles you? Anything that you consider pointing your pen or camera at next?
Some people have a brilliant sort of way of carrying around a loaded portfolio full of not just the next idea, but the next 7, and they're capable of pitching them all and talking about them. My plan is to have a lie down and see what bites me on the arse. It's not perhaps the best plan, but it seems to be the way things work.
Going back to a controversy one last time, what's the most trouble you've ever gotten into for a joke?
Probably misguidedly converting my brother's nosebleed into something that looked like a car accident. He had a spectacular nosebleed, and my brother and I constructed him. We got him to look like he'd fallen off his bike. We smeared the blood all over him, and then we ran inside saying, "Hey, Mom, he's been hit by a tractor." We realized when the impact of that was played out in full that was probably not a good idea. So don't try that one.
The tanks came back, my house got shelled, the AVs came, the kids start to yell, I'm sick of this shit, my cousin got hit. If I was still 13, I'd be throwing bricks in the mix by default, cause I was born here, I feel too revolt.